Today on the Clean Power Hour, we're going to talk about solar safety and fire safety. As solar and storage explodes onto the landscape in the U.S., there are greater concerns about how to make your solar and storage project truly safe. I'm Tim Montague. Welcome to the Clean Power Hour. I'm joined by my co-host, John Weaver, the commercial solar guy. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Tim. How you doing? Nice to see you again. Hope you had a nice week.
I had a wonderful week. I took the week off last week and went to Colorado and Utah. I visited a great solar advocate and consultant named Bill Ellard, who lives near Zion. So I got to see Zion National Park. I got to visit Mesa Verde. I got to see so much of the Four Corners area and would love to do a whole show on that. But today we're going to talk more down to earth about solar and storage and some of the stories that you've covered in your blog, which I'm going to put on the screen right now. And let's just get into this. So
Sure.
lithium ion is a wonderful technology, John. As you and I know, it is the holy grail for renewable energy, right? Today it is the highest density energy storage technology that we have. It's used in electric vehicle batteries, and increasingly it's used in batteries that offer grid services, resiliency, backup power, frequency regulation. You can do all kinds of things with batteries that reduce your power bill. Demand charge reduction in the West is a big thing, and maybe on the East Coast, I don't know. Here in Illinois, we use batteries for capacity charge reduction and resiliency and frequency regulation. And when it pencils, it's eye-popping. But what are you writing about here? There's a dark side to lithium, and what is that?
Well, first off, we're storing huge amounts of energy in a tight area, and energy it does what it does. It wants to escape. It wants to spread. Entropy's this thing, and if we don't do a good job of it, it's going to go out of the system in ways that we don't like. And this article was I covered a report by UL, specifically the UL firefighter team, and they were researching a battery explosion that occurred in Arizona, Surprise, Arizona, in April of 2019. 8 firefighters, 8 first responders were injured, 4 firefighters, 4 on the hazmat team. 3 of the hazmat team went to the hospital, 2 of them seriously so. And this is, we're still early in utility scale batteries. We've had very few incidents. Solar, we have millions of solar systems and less than 100 or 200 solar fires a year. So, I mean, it's safe statistically. But nonetheless, we got to pay attention to it because we're in the beginning game. So this fire, what occurred is that around 4:30 in the afternoon, the system noticed the voltage in one set of modules in one rack. So there's like 35 racks within the shipping container, about 2.2 megawatt hours.
You're talking about a battery now.
Yeah, I'm talking about a big battery.
Just so our listeners understand, we talk about solar modules and solar panels. We also talk about battery modules and battery cells. So anyway, go on.
I'll do the shape real quick. You got a shipping container, has like 2.2 megawatt hours. And then within the shipping container, you have individual racks. And each rack holds, say, 100 kilowatt hours. And within each rack, there's an inverter, there's some intelligence, some hardware to manage it. And then the majority of the rack is made up of modules. And each of these modules has the individual battery cells. And so there may be tens or hundreds of battery cells per module. So it's like solar cells are battery cells, solar modules are modules, and then systems are connect to an inverter. So, a neat buildup. And so the smallest component was being measured. The voltage was seen that it dropped. A few moments later, about 30 seconds literally, the smoke detector system started going off. After the smoke detector system went off, the fire suppression system put the fire down. About an hour later, the fire department got a phone call saying, hey guys, we see smoke coming from a substation. Within 30 minutes, the fire department was there, and that image right there you see on the screen is what they saw, like this hazy smoke on the ground. They were there for about an hour. They first searched outside the fence, measured chemicals, measured temperatures. Then they went inside the fence, did the same. They noticed the temperatures were dropping over the course of this hour. At the end of that period, with the utility representative on site, they then said, okay, we need to look inside of the battery. We need to see what's inside of this structure, this shipping container. They opened the door, and that's those 4 pictures you saw, a series of 1, 2, 3, 4. And first they opened it and viewed it. They wanted to see if there was fire. There was nothing. They put hardware inside to measure the chemicals in the air. They got a reading on that. They put temperature measures. So all these events were going on during about 33 seconds. And it's in order there in that image. And these were taken from a video that was set up to record the event. Right after image 4.14, the one in the lower right, 33 seconds after the door was opened is when there was an explosion. This explosion, the man that you can just barely see through that door, he was thrown 73 feet. He went through the fence, and he landed on a bush, and he set the bush on fire. The gentleman who was right behind him was thrown 33 feet. He went through the fence. The other 2 hazmat people nearby were both knocked unconscious. And, they believe it was because of a buildup of gases that when they mixed in with the oxygen, I guess as they opened it, and the heat led to this explosion. The only thing that they want to change to make this not occur on a shipping container level is having sensors and fans that can pump out these gases. And this is a known thing, this buildup of gas. And so this is an event where it occurred. And, statistically speaking, batteries are super, super safe. But, it's a thing we got to pay attention to. And, the firefighting team, the UL group, they put out a list of recommendations for training for how to better deal with this. Mostly focused on training. They made a few technical recommendations. For instance, having better knowledge about what's going on inside of the shipping container, better data. This unit shut off about an hour before the explosion. This unit's internal data, cut out. So there was no more information flowing. And so these are shipping containers of batteries. These are going to be deployed in the tens of thousands across the United States in the coming decades, maybe hundreds of thousands of them. And we got to get good at them because we have to, because there will be incidents. It's the nature of reality.
Yeah, lithium is a wonderful element. It is the 3rd most abundant element in the universe. It's a very light element, but it's also a great storage element. Like hydrogen, hydrogen is also a good storage device, so to speak. But lithium, like hydrogen, is also prone to runaway chain reactions. And so if lithium gets too hot, it does catch fire. And I don't know what the gas is that the battery gave off, though, John. Do you know?
They do mention it. It might be HCN mixing. In the report, they without a doubt talk about it. And the APS report. So there's 2 reports that were covered. One was written by Julian Spector. He covered, and I reference it a couple times in the article, he covered the report from the utility and a document that came from DNVGL. And their document was great. I wish I had time to write another article on just their document. But they looked at more of the technical stuff. They got into the gases, and I remember looking at them specifically. So if you want to get into the details, you can link directly to the UL report in my article, and you can link directly to the DNVGL report. I also linked to it in my article and Spector's article to, a nice round view from the worker and the technical side of it. So 2 good reports, I think, to help us really learn about, what we have to think about with big batteries.
Yep. We're going to see a lot more batteries in our lives, of course. The tipping point for electric vehicles is the main thing for most consumers. The main way that consumers are going to touch big lithium batteries is through EVs, and then also Powerwall style batteries that sit in your garage and provide load shifting, right? So you're you're spinning the meter backwards many times with solar. And so having a battery in your garage allows you to store that energy, extra energy in the battery, and then discharge it when that energy is worth more, say in the late afternoon when the sun isn't shining as much, but energy is expensive. So, you know, in the commercial industrial world, we are now seeing batteries take off. You're seeing it more in Massachusetts. We're seeing it just a little bit here in Illinois. We're doing maybe 5 megawatts of battery projects right now. And, you know, in a few years, that'll be double. But it is heady days for solar and storage, despite these safety hazards. Anything else about this safety story, though? I started laughing when you talked about the firefighter catching the bushes on fire. I don't mean to in any way disrespect the harm that came to the first responders. I'm very concerned about first responders, and in general, human safety around these facilities is first and foremost. And we do definitely want to take this seriously and learn from it. And of course, making battery containers that are less airtight would be a good thing. The challenge is, right, that the battery doesn't like too hot or too cold. And so you have to space condition the container. Yep. And so if the container is constantly ventilating air to the outside, that increases the energy demand of the container. It becomes like a building, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't need that. It doesn't need to be constantly moving it. It only needs to do this particular off-gassing when there's an issue, because this buildup only occurred after the cells caught on fire and released the gas. So what the recommendations are better sensors of a broader variety that can understand more so what's going on, things that have to be understood, to then communicate that information out to external actors, as well to have hardware specifically for when the gas gets bad. Because in general, it should be okay. 99.99% of the time, there will be no off-gassing from the cells. It's when there's an issue that the off-gassing needs to occur. Because you're right, you don't want batteries in the desert getting hot and having shuffling desert air in there. Not in Arizona. This is just outside of Phoenix, a place that, you know, I think last month their average temperature was above 100 for like a week. This is daytime and nighttime. So you're right about conditioning these batteries and taking care of them, but we shouldn't have to do it 24/7. It's only when there's a challenge does this system need to kick in.
So there's a related story, which I'm now sharing on the screen, from GTM, world's largest customer-sited solar and storage plant. Capital Dynamics is building a massive solar plus storage plant next to a switch data center. Is the model replicable? Of course it is, Julian Spector. We love you, Julian. Thank you for writing about the solar and storage explosion, no pun intended, but there is an explosion of solar and storage now in the U.S. This is about what is this? 60 megawatt battery, 240 megawatt hour. So it's a 4-hour battery paired with a 127 megawatt solar project. And, you know, in 10 years, it'll be completely common that every large solar project will be paired with storage. But today there's a noticeable uptick. But what strikes you about this story, John?
Well, the concept of building a power plant at a building. There's a lot of acres that goes into building a solar power plant. But really, this company, 127 megs of solar, 60 megs of of battery inverter. I bet you that plant could run, 10 hours in the day, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours overnight at 20, 30, 40 megawatts, and run for 24 hours at 50%. They reference almost 24/7 power, but 127 megs, that could output at 60 megs from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. And then that 640, that'll get it up to like 16, 17 hours. But if they get down to like, say, a 30 megawatt demand in that structure, that system could run, that's getting close to a 24-hour power plant at this data center. That just interests me. This is real close to being a microgrid, of course. I mean, if they have to shut down the building and deal with a calamity, the power systems at this building could be run, not the data center, because the data center is just sucking in electricity. But the structure itself, from a safety perspective, will never go down. This facility is, I don't know much about military hardening, but this facility hypothetically would just never go down ever for like 30 years. And I bet you runs at 30, 40, 50% of its data output. And so that's just interesting. It's a giant system. The largest behind-the-meter solar system, I believe, is in Colorado at a steel facility. It's about 240 megawatts. And I think they just broke ground on that system. And so it's just real interesting that behind the meter, I'm a C&I solar guy. The best solar system for a business person saving money is behind the meter. You knock down all their costs. You knock down their transmission, their distribution. You knock down environmentals. You knock down taxes. All of the costs that are per kilowatt hour or per kilowatt. You got to work out that equation. And so having a power plant, not just a solar system. This is a power plant. This is a proper power plant behind the meter. That's neat.
The thing about data centers is they consume a huge amount of power relative to their footprint. And so rooftop solar traditionally really doesn't work for them because you might be able to put, if we covered, now look at the photo on screen, right?
Yep.
Nice big roof. Okay. But if we fill that roof with solar, we might get a couple megawatts on there, and that's going to offset a couple percentage points of the facility's energy load. These things right here that have 1,000 on them, these are air conditioning units.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool.
These facilities, because they're server farms, right, they're filled with computers, they're generating a tremendous amount of heat internally, and so they have tremendous HVAC loads, which adds to the electric load of the facility. But so what they're doing here, though, is they're offsetting the energy load of the facility with a solar facility next door. This is a 600-acre solar farm, 127 megawatts. And then they're firming up that solar with lithium-ion batteries. Now, traditionally, we build data centers at Continental Electrical, our sister company, and so we know a lot about data centers. And I've run the numbers on several data center opportunities. They all have UPS systems built into them, right? Uninterruptible power systems. And so they need to have backup. They have duplicate backup power systems. And so the lithium ion is now coming onto the scene. They're using traditional lead acid in these UPS systems for the most part. And now those UPS systems are also being disrupted by lithium. But these are going to be, the lithium batteries are going to look very similar to these HVAC units, right? They're going to be containers, large containers. And because you get about a megawatt in a 40-foot container. So you're going to just line the facility, or in this case, they're going to put the containers of batteries probably next to the solar farm so that those physics work well. You don't want to have long runs to the battery from the solar if you can avoid it, because you'll have line losses. But yeah, it's an exciting project to see the scale, 60 megawatts behind the meter of storage. So that's a new watermark. We should probably move on, John, in the
name of time.
Yes. So let me dial in your blog.
Sure.
Top 13 list of solar power hardening tips, costs, and logic included.
So if you wanted to, you could go to the first image chart, which is just table 1. And this is the best summary of the overall article. Really what this is, it's a continuation of a series of reports done by NREL, FEMA, the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories, the Department of Energy, looking at solar in aggressive wind regions. The Caribbean, Southeast United States, these are areas of focus. And, this plant, I mean, that thing is just decimated. They didn't note the city, but, everything was just ripped off that facility. And what this document does, it looks at physical actions, it looks at hardware and processes to literally increase the amount of wind that your system can sustain. And it starts with, just some that are pure labor. For instance, torquing. If you have perfectly torqued every bolt on your project, you have done the number one thing that NREL thinks will protect you against wind. Tighten your bolts. Check your connections. That's number one. And number two, bolts and connections. If you can do those two, it's like brushing your teeth and wearing your seatbelt. You're going to live a decent life. And so that's number one and two.
Let's step back from this for a second, though. So what we're talking about is when you have rooftop or ground-mounted solar, there are things that can happen. Things like hurricanes or tornadoes or just downbursts. We had a downburst here in the Chicago area that blew apart one of the IKEA rooftop solar arrays that we installed a couple years ago.
Wow.
And it just basically created a hole in the array, right? It was a downburst. These are very isolated, high velocity wind events that just happen during storms. And then it scatters the modules like you see in this photo this is on a bigger scale. This was, I think, a hurricane, although we don't know which project this is.
It was a 2017 hurricane is what the document said. Yeah.
But as you can imagine, when solar meets wind, that is a very big challenge for the solar because the solar is just out there catching the wind. It's a beautiful kite those solar panels make. And so how can we, as installers, make our installations more robust?
Yep.
And when you mention torquing, you're referring to tightening the bolts to a very specific measurement so they're properly torqued. And then the question is, John, when the array is 5 years old, do you have to go back and retorque all those bolts?
So that's actually, yes, in general, retorquing is something you want to spot check as you go through the many years. It actually notes the O&M cost associated with it. In the report, it also notes that if you use the proper fasteners, the proper bolts, the proper types of washers that lock into place, they might cost you an extra 1/4 cent, 1/10 of a cent per watt when you initially install it, but they're going to hold those bolts and screws and everything in place tight for a much longer time than just a torqued connection. So there are ways to up this and make it last longer and lower your long-term O&M. And you can actually see an example of this. If you scroll to the bottom of the article, there's a large solar facility that was a direct strike of the 140, 150 mile per hour hurricane that hit Puerto Rico a few years back and caused just mass devastation. And the facility was up immediately. They managed the hardware. Let's see, scroll up a tiny bit. That's obviously not the plant. Keep going. Maybe I didn't cover it in this article. This is the washers. Okay, I referenced it then. Here, go to, scroll up just a tiny bit. I'll show you where it's at. There's a Rocky Mountain article. And maybe that link right there, if you scroll to that, that's they'll cover it. And they talk about, best practices. And within here, they get into a project that lasted. And, it might not be in this article, so we don't have to click around. But here's, there's good data on how to do this. So this is something we know how to do. We make our judgment call on cost structures, on what we need to pay. And within all these different systems, we do know how to do this. The question is, does it make sense for you to do it? Does it make sense at your facility to install these additional costs? And that comes down to having an engineering conversation. Most of these systems are very well designed for 105 to 135 miles an hour. It's kind of neat. My company, in Florida was highlighted in that report because in Miami, we had to put down a third rail on a specific residential site because this city had just instituted 175 mile per hour wind codes in downtown city. And so 175 mile per hour, we had to literally add in an extra piece of metal to attach the unit to the roof an extra 27 times. And we have these tools. We know how to do it. It's just math. The solar at that point is stronger attached to the house than the roof is because the roof isn't designed for 175, 185 miles per hour.
Right.
So, the roof will get pulled off before the solar will. And so this document is nice. It gets into the details. So if you're an engineer or you're a project manager or maybe you're just a facility owner and you want to sound smart when you talk to your contractor and see what these different things are because you're a little bit worried about wind at your facility for whatever reason, tall structure, you got a lot of wind coming off the lake, maybe that happens near you. The wind comes off the big lakes, hits these things. Whatever it is, there's a solution to it. And that's why I really love this report. It was just cool to read. I totally nerded out on bolts and fasteners and wind fences and all this kind of stuff. Just a bunch of metal. Makes me happy.
Yep. It's good stuff. And, we like any part of the built environment, we want it to be safe for the investor, the owner, and everybody around it. And solar is generally very safe and very tried and true, but nothing is perfect, and we can always improve and get better. So we're grateful for NREL's work, and we want NREL to have more funding for this kind of work. It's so important for the industry to evolve. Okay, we have to grow constantly, and so, all right. So there's another story though that from PV Magazine that we talked about that I want to address, and that is about the space constraints or space requirements of solar. One of the concerns that consumers have is that we're going to, for example, pave over the breadbasket with solar panels. Here in the Midwest, right? This is the breadbasket. We have lots of farmland, mostly corn and beans. And we are seeing large solar farms come in. I have a 1,600 acre solar farm that's being developed 10 miles from my home here in Champaign County. But there's 640,000 acres in Champaign County. This project is 1,600 acres. So it's a fraction of a percent of the landscape of the county. And that is going to be true of the Midwest, even though we're going to get hundreds of large utility scale projects coming in the next 10 years. They're going to suck up just a tiny fraction of the landscape because the United States is a very big place. And some smart people have done this calculation time and time again. Elon Musk is famous for doing this calculation. What is Musk's calculation, John?
So Elon, a square that has two sides that are each 100 miles, so a 10,000 square mile square, can generate enough electricity to power the whole of the United States. And I think the United States is, hundreds of thousands of square miles, millions of square miles. I think it's, and so the percentage of land that's necessary to power the U.S., if we were to do an extremist calculation like this, is really tiny. And you actually have it in one of your tweets I saw up on your screen. There's a map for other countries also. And for instance, Ethiopia could meet 100% of its electricity with 0.001% of electricity. And, in the United States, we could probably do it with 0.6 to 1% of our land and meet all of our energy. And so, a square, 100 miles square on each side, 10,000 square miles, we can cover the whole planet with that, or not the planet, we can cover the whole of the United States. And, that article, we wrote it a few years ago. Tim Sylvia and I wrote it at PV Magazine earlier this year, I think. And we wrote it because Musk had talked about this square. And then people are like, you don't want to have a giant square in the desert. And we're like, Well, listen, first off, he doesn't want a giant square in the desert. He wants something a lot more complex. But what else we can do? We don't need to do a giant square in the desert to cover our electricity. NREL, again, NREL, thank you, NREL, love you guys. NREL put out a report showing that with a 16% solar module, we can meet 40% of the U.S.'s electricity using about 40% of our rooftops. Right now, we're at 20% modules, so that brings that number up to close to 50. So we could meet half of the nation's electricity just on rooftops with our current batch of buildings. These are buildings not optimized for solar. So we could, if we wanted to, this is extreme, you know, we're just talking big numbers. You know, it's probable that wind is going to be 50% of our electricity, and hydro and maybe some nuclear. Oh, there it is. This is the great article. I love this image. Look at that. All the solar right there. And, you know, 4.8%. Wow, look at that. Livestock feed. Where's the golf one? Somewhere on here is golf. And there's more for golf than there is for...
The area needed for golf, which is similar to the area needed for solar.
So there you go.
the thing that so struck me. This is a graphic from, I think, a Forbes article, but I put this slide together. You see this big yellow in the middle? That's cow pasture, sheep, goats, others, horses, and so we're using 40% of our land in some way, shape, or form for cows. 8% just for livestock feed, and getting to solar is just 0.5% of the land area of the lower 48, right? So we need a tiny fraction of what we're using for ag for solar, and we're just swimming in land. I was just, when you drive across the Midwest and the Southwest, you realize that we are so rich in land. It's different on the East Coast, right? Because it's a much denser, urbanized environment. But once you get out here in the Midwest, boy, we are just swimming in land, and it truly is why we're such a rich country. Of course, we have not lots of natural resources under the ground, but we also have great farmland and forest products, etc. So anyway, consumers, you can relax because we're not going to pave over the breadbasket. We're going to consume a small fraction of the landscape. And if we do it in a pollinator-friendly way, of course, then many of these solar farms can be an ecological asset. You're turning the ground into organic farm ground. You're growing native pollinator plants that are good for insects like butterflies, good for birds, good for bees. And those things are also really taking it on the chin because of industrialization and just this, onslaught of development that humanity has unleashed. It's not an evil will that we have. It's just, we just like to grow and consume things. And so now we're a major force of nature here on planet Earth, which is why we need more batteries to make the energy transition. So what else should we talk about, John?
If we're going to talk about food and solar, I'm really interested in talking about a greenhouse. Just a perfect little segue. There's an article on PV Magazine, the international version, that I really liked, and it just, if you get into the article, the science behind it is that when a solar panel wants to take certain photon wavelengths, and it'll drive the energy, but a plant wants the same. A plant wants, if you see a green plant, it means it's reflecting the green light. So if we can make solar panels absorb green light, hey, maybe that makes sense. But, there's high energy, there's low energy, there's a lot of physics involved. But what we're doing now is that we're getting really good at manipulating solar cells, the color of them, and how they absorb light. I mean, we're working on atomic level, even subatomic level, and we're building new solar panels that are optimized to grow crops underneath them. And this is super cool. I mean, if you think about the Netherlands, they're the largest one of the larger exporting nations of food. And they're this tiny little country that's half underwater on the northern edge of continental Europe, and they have greenhouses covering huge swaths of land, and they make fruit and tomatoes and beautiful things, vegetables year round. And if they suddenly put on optimized solar panels, they could be making food and electricity in the exact same structure at the exact same moment, using exactly the sunlight that each of them wants to use. And yeah, the food might grow a slight bit smaller, and yeah, the panels won't be as perfectly efficient, but who cares? You just doubled the use of your land. And you know, speaking of, we were just talking about land use. Well, if we made the food land make electricity, this land use argument is gone. Your goodbye land use argument. But now we just made the food more valuable. Now we just made maybe cheaper food because the food is being optimized. So I was just super, super interested in seeing that. It's a progression I've been seeing. It makes me think about the Jinko building integrated announcement that they just made when they were talking about their new panel. You know, putting solar panels into glass. If you're building a new structure, or if you're retrofitting your structure, you as a facility owner, should you now be looking at your building envelope's electricity generation potential? Are we there yet? Jinko, the largest solar panel assembly company on the planet, gaining on 15, 20 gigawatts, somewhere in that volume, just announced a building integrated product that looks just like these solar panels. Well, actually, technically, I don't know what it looks like, but hypothetically, it's very similar to the solar panels we just saw in this PV magazine article. And if that's starting to happen now, you know, if we can really get 40, 50% of our electricity just from windows in a perfectly optimized world, that's yet again, that's another attack on this land use argument. We have plenty of places to get electricity from as we scale, as we grow this solar revolution. And there's pieces falling in, just falling in. We're learning the coloring. We're doing building integrated. We're tying it into farming. It's, you know, structures being upgraded. Oh, man, that's beautiful.
So you mentioned building integrated, and that is, in general, what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about putting solar panels on greenhouses, putting solar panels on gigantic awnings like this picture, the Tajong Pagar, which is the largest solar PV canopy in the world, which is a project of Onyx's. Onyx is famous for making high-tech, transparent or translucent glass that has integrated solar in it, so you can then make the glass, the solar glass, part of the building. And eventually, right, we're going to coat the entire structure of these high-rise buildings. This is that building with the awning is just a small part of it, right, that is solarized in this case. But you can see that the facade of a large high-rise is great potential if you can make the PV cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, when I see a high-rise project, I run screaming, right? Anything above, say, 10 stories is very problematic. You have to do super engineering, fully attached. You've got a very small roof for a very large volume of building, and PV just isn't going to work, or isn't going to do much in terms of offsetting. But if you could coat the entire surface of the structure in PV, now that could generate some real energy and really offset the footprint of the building.
And there's plenty of research ongoing pushing that. I see an article a week on it. It's, you know, the Onyx, I've looked into their return on investment numbers, and they say when it's new solar with the building, the solar cost, it covers itself in less than a year. You know, it's trivial. The solar becomes a trivial aspect of the broader project costs at that stage because of where we've gotten cells to and inverters and all the wiring. Because, you know, glass and steel and all that stuff's expensive, and solar is made of the same. It's not much different, and you're replacing building materials with the solar panel. So it is going to come. It's going to be slower with building because, you know, upgrading a structure is very expensive, and our building stock is a slow rolling thing. You know, these buildings last 50, 100 plus years. You know, you go to England, they last for 1,000 years. So it'll come. It's neat to watch. Your next building, your future building, will be fully solarized. That's going to have to be what happens next.
And then the other good example of building integrated is Tesla's solar roof, right? So they're making a glass solar tile. This is what you're looking at here. The entire roof is made of solar tiles. Now, not all of the tiles will have solar in them. If you're on the north side of the roof, then you would just have regular tiles, but they will be matching glass. They just won't have PV integrated. And then the south-facing tiles will have PV integrated. And this is going to become a real thing. This is still a premium product. I don't know what the cost is per watt, but here's a great breakdown. So the tiles come in strips. You see all the electrical connections. And Tesla's running around now trying to find contractors to become certified installers, because they are now stepping on the gas with this. Now they're in version 4, I think, of the solar tile. They've dialed in the technology, and they're ready for it going mainstream. There you see the dimensions, 15 inches by 45 inches.
Pretty cool.
And Tesla is rolling out leasing programs, right, to make solar more accessible. So it's just like you lease a car, you lease a solar roof. And the other thing that I love about Tesla is they do have a vision, right? They are a mission-driven company to electrify transportation, bring storage to the fringe, right? Bring storage to the home and the vehicle. And because storage is the holy grail of renewable energy, we need to have storage. It's also the holy grail of electric vehicles, right? You can't have an EV without a nice battery. And stay tuned for the battery day, right? The battery day is coming, and they are going to make some big announcement. We don't know what that is. It could be a solid state battery. It just could be more mileage out of the battery. They've now got million-mile batteries that can cycle more cycles. But anyway, Tesla gets it, and they have created a series of products, EVs, the Powerwall battery. Here's the residential version here on the wall. They make very large commercial industrial versions of that as well, of course, for commercial, industrial, and utility scale batteries. And then the solar on the roof. And that is the perfect tripartite. And they are going to kick some serious butt economically. Tesla's market cap is already bigger than all the other American car companies combined. And this is only going to get worse. So I am biased. I am a Tesla investor. I am making lots of money by investing in Tesla. And I love to tell the story that I gave my kids one share of Tesla stock for Christmas this past year. It was worth less than $350 a share at Christmas in 2019, right? They were completely nonplussed. They're both young men. They're 20 and 18 now. Nonplussed by the Tesla stock. Okay, they're like, yeah, Dad, but it's probably peaked. It's probably never going to get any better. Well, here we are. It's at like $1,600 a share now. And this is just the beginning. This is the Coke of our age, the Coca-Cola. You hear stories of grandmas who bought some Coca-Cola stock in the early 1900s. And then, 100 years later, they're super rich. This is the case with Tesla. Tesla is the tech stock of the era. And I don't think the window's closed. I tell my friends, buy Tesla and or buy a Tesla with self-driving capabilities, John, right? Because then you have an autonomous vehicle that you can lease out and run as a robo-taxi while you're sitting at the computer.
That's the plan. I got a Model Y coming. It's my first new car in my life, and it's going to be a Tesla Model Y. I like awesome. The hatchback. Yeah, it's got a lot of space to throw some equipment in the back. I mean, that's really what the goal is. Plus, I like to camp, and the Teslas have camping mode, which is sweet. So I'm looking forward to it.
So the Model Y, we could talk all day about Tesla, and we won't. But the Model Y, I'm just going to put this on screen because this is the game changer. Americans love SUVs, right? They have, this is their second SUV. The Model X was an SUV also, but it was a higher end product for a higher end market. Now the Model Y is aiming squarely at Joe consumer, and I'm thinking about buying a Model Y myself. I have put a deposit on the Cybertruck because I'm definitely going to get a Cybertruck, but this is going to become the most popular Tesla. We hear a lot about the Model S and the Model 3. This car is going to be the home run for Tesla, though, and going to be the all-time lead, the biggest seller, because Americans love SUVs. Tell me about camping mode. I hadn't heard about that, but I'm a big camper too. So what does camping mode do for you?
Well, if you go out camping and it's hot and humid and whatever, and you just want to hang out in the car, it's going to get foggy and it's just going to get hot. You can't sleep in a car overnight. It's terrible. But if you go out in a Tesla and you fold the chairs in properly and lay down bedding material, you can sleep in the back, you can seal it, and then flick a switch in the computer, and it's going to regulate the temperature so that you have a comfortable environment. And I think I remember reading that it uses 1 to 2 kilowatt hours per hour or so to do this regulating. So you could get more than a full day of perfectly regulated camping. And if you wanted to be indoors for a day and a half, of course you would prefer to only have it running for 8 hours so you can drive in, sleep, and then get out if it's an environment where you need it. But it just allows you to pull over and go to sleep anywhere, and camping mode. And for me, a guy who likes to go up into the mountains, and sometimes I get there super late and the weather's bad and I just want to hit the trail in the morning, first thing in the morning. Well, I'm going to drive right up to the trailhead. I'm going to park in the parking lot. I'm going to flip down my seats and just go to bed. And and I have family up and down the East Coast, from upstate New York to all my friends and family down in Miami, Florida. And so every couple of years I will do an East Coast drive. And I'll, instead of flying to 3 or 4 cities, I'll drive to 15 cities, and I'll see all my brothers, all my aunts, my mom, all my nieces and nephews, and then friends. And so it's a good time, and I enjoy it. And being able to pull over and camp on the Blue Ridge Parkway, or, you get down to South Florida, just being able to pull up to any beach and just, you're there and you can just hang out at the beach. And if you want to go to a hotel, you're cool, you can do that. But when I'm cruising, when I'm driving, it's just nice to be able to pull over and have a fire and be outside. And if you need to sleep and you don't, I always have a tent. But if for some reason you can't tent because there's just no place, just, put down some sheets, flip the seats down, and you got a full-size bed, and it'll be comfortable. Windows rolled up, and that's key. No mosquitoes. South Florida mosquitoes are terrible. Oh, they will eat you.
Yeah, so it's like pet mode for humans. I've heard of the pet mode, and it makes sense, right? Just keep the car climate controlled while you're sleeping in it or hanging out in it, and that would be awesome to not have to run the vehicle, so to speak, right? But be able to maintain the climate.
That's the key, and you are running the vehicle, but you don't need to run a ICE engine that's spewing gas, and you run 1/10 of the car just for the air conditioner, which is really, really a great thing if you think about it. The inefficiency of an ICE vehicle, you have to turn the engine on to get anything out of it. Whereas a Tesla, you can just go click and it'll do its thing. It's just electricity is so neat. And if we're getting good with it, with these controls that we have, makes me happy.
Yep.
Oh, this is neat.
So we're going to geek out on one last thing here today, and that is dual axis trackers for solar on rooftop solar. Most people are familiar or somewhat familiar with dual axis trackers that look like this, right? It's a pole mounted array of, say, 16 solar panels, 20 solar panels, and then it tracks the sun east to west on the daily basis, and then over the course of the year, the everything tips and follows the sun also as it rises and falls in the sky. Double axis trackers are certainly a known phenomenon. They're just known for A, having mechanical issues, B, being expensive, and therefore mostly out of reach in the commercial world, certainly. But here's a real live installation in California, right, of this rooftop double axis tracker.
Yeah, it's made by a company named PV Booster. This is at least their second version of this product. They installed a megawatt system a couple of years ago that I remember reading. And so the key with this hardware is that, first off, you can't fit as many panels on the site as you can with normal systems. So your energy density is lower. You see all that space between the panels. But
is it lower by a third or something like that, or what? Do you know?
I do remember the numbers. I've seen them, and I think it might be lower by roughly that number, a third. And this is the energy density, though. So it's going to have fewer panels, but it's going to produce more electricity per panel. And here's the key. The company pitches that based on the system cost, the O&M costs, and all their equations, that your ROI on the system, so your payback, will be faster than a standard solar rooftop installation. So if you have a structure that can offer you significantly more solar than you need, like you have a single-story building and it's a giant building, and it's a low-impact, low-electricity building, this might be a good product for you because the ROI will be higher. However, if you have a super energy-dense structure, like, say, the Switch data center, your ROI will be higher, but you are going to produce less electricity on that roof. So there's a trade-off. Do you want higher ROI, or do you want more electricity? Do you want a fixed system that sits there and it's dumb and just does its job for 2 decades? Or do you want a system that's a little more technically advanced? You can see that hardware gizmo underneath your mouth.
I would say this is a lot more complicated than ballasted rooftop solar. So let's talk about some of these nitty gritties, though. You see it's got a 3-legged platform that the motor system sits on, right? And then it's holding a solar panel. It's connecting unit to unit, so there's conduit running all over the place. What is keeping this weighed down? What keeps it from flying off the roof?
Well, I mean, I'm sure
the system becomes a ballasted network in and of itself from the motors, maybe. It looks like it's ballasted. It doesn't look attached. Maybe it's attached. I don't know.
We could get, if really what it comes down to, Tim, is that you need to interview this gentleman. I mean, you're a commercial rooftop. I'm connected with them on LinkedIn, so I'll make sure to make an introduction, and we'll talk about it and figure it out. Because I've spoken with them.
We'll bring them on the show for sure.
Yeah, they're good peeps. They're smart. They know some math. And the gentleman who's behind the idea, he's a serial entrepreneur. When you see his company and you see his name, you'll be like, oh, I've seen that guy before.
Oh, really?
They do these things. Yeah. He's not a solar guy. He's just, I think the company is like Idea Labs. It's this big Cali research group. Yeah,
I know Idea Lab.
Yeah, I think this came out of their machine, to the best of my knowledge. So, I'll connect you with the interviews, and you'll learn about another cool product. Because this is in our wheelhouse. This is a commercial, industrial focused product. They want to bring high efficiency to the commercial rooftop. And their new model is specifically optimized to work well, they say, with bifacial. With all that gear behind the panel, I wonder what the real benefit is, if it's just some benefit. But, hey, if they can do the math and they can optimize the angle of those machines to catch the reflectivity off that rooftop, and they have some back-end smart algorithms, a little bit of machine learning, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's because you notice the picture that they shared, the solar panels were facing, I think, multiple directions, and at minimum, they were not facing the direction of the standard hard installed panels. So there's some smarts with this system. It knows how to track, and I think it's interesting. I've never installed one, but I'm interested in learning more.
Good deal. Well, we're out of time, John. It's been great talking to you again, and I want to encourage our listeners to check us out on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and search on CES NRG and my name, Tim Montague, you will find the SolarWorks for Illinois channel, including the Clean Power Hour that we're doing now on a weekly basis with John Weaver, the commercial solar guy. How can people find you, John?
CommercialSolarGuy.com, of course. On Twitter, my handle is SolarInMass, massive amounts, and in Massachusetts. LinkedIn, you can search for John Fitzgerald Weaver. If you go to Google, I'm the only John Fitzgerald Weaver of any note on the whole first page. Maybe somebody snuck on the first page, but I'm number one on the first page. And I'm all over the internet. Commercial solar guy. That's I'm the only one that I know of so far that seems to be moving up the Google search results. So that'll find me in 15 different places.
All righty. Well, there you have it. Clean Power Hour. I'm Tim Montague, your co-host. Have a great day, everybody.